Welcome to another Stompy 51 miniature adventure. Today we're going to talk about upcycling my old school plastic Marauders into something ever so slightly more interesting. Particularly as part of its Warcry game, Games Workshop these days makes some fantastic looking evil human chaos Marauders. Albeit at a price. But 'twas not ever thus. And I'm not sure who this lovely paint job was trying to kid, but these long-standing Chaos plastic Marauders that hung around for I think all of the 90s, all of the 2000s, and I think most of the 2010s until Warcry were not fantastic. And so, given the rise of the various miniatures agnostic games, Dragon Rampant, Saga Age of Magic, Kings of War, frankly, I could see a use for them in all of those games, but they just needed that little bit of something. And I thought, what happens if I just mash them up with all the bits in my bits box and all the various sprues leftovers from all the various other things I've got and just see what we can achieve. But that required a bit of a narrative stitching together. So I drew Kitbashing inspiration from Shagga, son of Dolph, from Game of Thrones, where you have these hillside tribes who basically have nothing, who have struggled on the edges of civilization of Westeros, just raiding and pillaging, until Tyrion says, why don't you end that existence and let me, with all my wealth and family wealth, why don't you let us, the Lannisters, arm you and give you the best, latest kit? And so, using the best of a Games Workshop Dwarven dispossessed sprue, I imagine that to be what the dwarves of the old world had done. Now let's look at them in groups. I must have bought about 2 boxes worth because I seem to have 40 of them, and just looking at the different pieces together, so these 3 heads are from the Chaos Marauder horse sprues, the more recent Games Workshop Marauder kit. Obviously all the bodies are Chaos Marauder old school, but I suppose your eye's not really being focused on those, it's looking at the heads. They always talk about, when you paint, focus on heads and bases, faces and bases. So I suppose that's effectively what we've done in terms of the kit bashing aspect. Now they all have some of them have a good weight to them, because either I stuck a 1p coin underneath them, because I just had them floating around, or there are these metal shields. These are from some Black Tree Designs old school dwarfs, and I didn't really like the shields, but in keeping with the principle that these are the barbarian horde kitted out by some dwarves and do their kind of craze fighting for them, why not? I mean, these heads are pretty cool and characterful, with their hair flailing about and looking all barbarian-like. That head is from the, I'm trying to remember, the Frostgrave Barbarian sprue. Again, a head I didn't like. These are all about really using bits from things that were just floating about. And that's a shield from the Wargames Foundry Viking kits. And the pièce de résistance, I thought all of these, wherever I could, were the weapons tips, the axe heads, which are encrusted with jewels and Norse mythology, Celtic mythology kind of runes and inscriptions and features. The only thing is making sure that, as best I could, that there is a plausible connection where I severed the head of the existing weapon. And I suppose I'll have to divide these into 2 units, somewhere there are the 2-handed weapon dudes, and somewhere single-handed plus shield, albeit there are plenty of rule sets which are unfussed by that. Let's get the next batch out. we can skip through, I suppose, the ones where there is little of interest to chat about. With some of them, like this one, I mean, that's a head from the more modern Chaos Marauder sprue. But, you know, he's the drummer boy, little drummer boy. Now, with some of these guys, I suppose they look more animated because of the Kitbash. I mean, his head's pretty small, being a head from the Frostgrave Corsairs or Pirates sprue, whatever it was called. But, you know, it's a sufficiently barbarian-looking head with an axe head way bigger than his own head and a Wargames Foundry shield. Now, I wasn't really sure about these Oathmark human infantry shields, but they seem to have worked out just fine. And there are some more of these Duarden Games Workshop dwarf axe heads, and that shield you'll all recognise as properly ancient. I've never liked those, and they've been floating around. The arm pads, of course, are from the more modern Duarden Games Workshop dwarf sprue. And that, strangely, is a head from the, I'm sure it's the Oathmark, not Oathmark, the Frostgrave Knight sprue, which I really found quite underwhelming. I just love the gap in these axe heads. I mean, I'm sure that infringes upon the integrity of the axe head. I mean, you want the force to be spread throughout, and that presumably just goes snap. But, you know, when was reality ever relevant? And I think that might be also, it's either from the Barbarian sprue or the Knight sprue by, as part of the Frostgrave lines. Next lot. I thought the most fun was to be had, of course, with the banner bearers, as it always is. He looks like a kind of, I'm sure it was in that film about Alexander the Great and all of his long marching troops. You know, they've all got these kind of bandanas around their heads as they've marched halfway to India. But this is, I think, a head from the Frostgrave Marauders, from the Frostgrave Pirates Corsairs sprue, again with an axe head shift and a banner up there, so he's quite fun. That's a shield, I think it's one of the original shields from this awful kit, the awful kit that these torsos came along with, these Marauder torsos. Again, an axe head conversion that doesn't look great and isn't quite straight, but again, I'm hoping once it's painted, who will notice? And if I really care, I could always fill it in. Not many mould lines on the original sprue, given that it was probably first made in the very early 90s, but it's all right. And that, I think, is a head from the Barbarian Frostgrave miniature sprue, with the best axe head of all, this kind of dwarf meets Cthulhu head. And that's, I think, the original leader head that comes, not original, that's the leader head that comes with the Chaos Marauder horse sprue, mixed in with those old Hammer Black Tree designs. Oh, no, hang on. These shields are Wargames Foundry Viking, I believe. Again, using what I've got. I suppose if he becomes the unit leader, that's what they kind of look like, as they look rearing to pile into the enemy. And now we come to our next lot. Next 5. I mean, these were a lot of fun. Will I ever paint them? Who knows? But they were a lot of fun. So that's a shield from the Chaos Marauder horse Wargames Foundry Viking shields, standard head and standard sword arm from, well, I think that's the original sprue that all of this came along with, as is that shoulder pad, very Skeletor-like, but that's a Chaos Marauder horse head. Now this is, as I've described in many videos, my favourite head from the Oathmark Human Infantry. Enormously versatile, could be barbarian, could be an English officer from the First World War, could be a Viking berserker, could be a pagan Rus head, all manner of things. He's just a dude with a very cool moustache. And he's got 2 axes and a Wargames Foundry shield stuck to his back. This guy's, unfortunately I couldn't get it off, and I thought, hey, it looks all right. And he's chucking a spear from the Chaos Marauder horse sprue. Because you see, although there is some kind of chaos, kind of runic type emblems floating about on these, actually, does it matter? They're not that chaosy. Could be something Norse, who knows? It's all just fantasy anyway. And that helmet, again looking like something from a Mad Max movie, from the Human Oathmark Infantry as the leader. You know, he goes perfectly well, I think, as a generic barbarian with his jewel-encrusted axe head over there. And then there were a series of these very lovely two-handed weapon axe heads, a work of art in themselves. I mean, how would I paint these? Anyway, that was on the Dwarden Games Workshop sprue, and I think I would just basically paint it all bronze, Sycorax bronze, dry brush it with a lighter golden metallic colour, and then just do the jewel, I think, and then obviously a heavy wash of, I don't know, red mixing with black, that kind of thing. And that's an Empire head. I mean, he's just a remarkably well coiffured barbarian, one of the original shields and the better shields that came along with the kit, and a weapon that came with the Chaos Marauder horse kit, albeit these guys have have weapons heads from the Dwarden sprue. Oathmark shield there. Now, this was a bit more controversial, I thought, this head, because it's from the Oathmark Human Infantry sprue, and you're basically melding kind of crazed steppe or mountain warrior generic type character with kind of Gump from the Village militia type head. But you know what, actually, I thought to myself, it does vaguely work in the sense that, you know, when you look at kind of Celtic warriors, you know, they've got those moustaches, could be a latter-day Celtic warrior with dwarven kit. I mean, there is that annoying sprue line on all of these particular axe arms, but I'm hoping it won't be too hard to remove, and after painted as ever, no one will notice or care. Comparison of the two. Banner bearers, again, just snipping off various flag heads from the Dwarden sprue that I think work quite well, again with my favourite head. I mean, as you can see, some of these axe heads are very slightly off, but I'm hoping, off centre, but I'm hoping it won't really be noticeable when painted. I mean, look at the detail on that. I mean, some of them work better than others. But hopefully in the group, no one will notice or care. And as I say, it was all about using what I've got. And the last lot, here we come. They vaguely remind me of something from C as well, where everyone is blind and yet a fantastic ninja, which is, I'm sure, not incompatible. I can see and I'd be an awful ninja. Oh, look, it's that same axe shaft that's got that really annoying mold line on it. But you see, I suppose you're mixing much more modern, detailed plastic with old school plastic, and I think it gives it a bit of a new lease of life. And I think we'll call it there. Thank you very much for watching to the end, says Shagga, son of Dolph, and his brother over there. Please do like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I hope to see you around these parts soon.